Hello, everyone. You are here for the Building Belonging Through Climate Action and Community Resilience webinar with our special guests today. My name is Kathryn Colby. I'm a senior community animator at the Tamarack Institute. And I'd like to acknowledge a couple of colleagues on the call today, Amanda Locke from Communities Building Belonging, who's hosting, and Orpa Kanagan, our tech support and learning lead for the organization. I'd like to acknowledge where I'm calling from today, which is the traditional territories of the Tla'amin, Lahus, Hamalko, Northern Coast Salish people on British Columbia's west coast. And I'd also like to acknowledge that Turtle Island, so-called North America, has been home since time immemorial to the ancestors of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We recognize that in this territory, Indigenous rights holders have endured historical oppression and continue to endure inequities that have largely resulted from the widespread failure of non-Indigenous treaty people to uphold our responsibilities. And if you want to take a moment in the chat to just locate yourself, that would be wonderful for the folks on this call. And I'd also like to acknowledge that those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or generations past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery, and we pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent. For today's webinar, we will send out a full recording of the call and slides, as well as a collection of links and resources that are named here in our conversation and in the chat. We recommend that you use the Q&A panel on your Zoom client to submit and vote for questions you'd like to discuss. For technical support, you can use the chat panel to ask for technical support throughout the webinar. One of our Tamarack team members will be able to help you. And for closed captioning, you can turn that on in your Zoom panel. So we are committed. Thank you, Orpa. We are committed to creating respectful virtual spaces here at Tamarack, and that all people on this call, by being here, agree to center equity, inclusion, and a sense of connection across all people. Tamarack's priority and responsibility is to protect the safety and well-being of staff and members of our learning community. And by participating in this event, you agree to participate with openness and respect for all. In this webinar, we are looking at part one in a series on belonging and climate change. Today, we welcome you all to the Building Belonging Through Climate Action and Community Resilience. In this webinar, we will explore the role of social connection in local climate change, or in local climate action, and how this contributes to a sense of belonging and community resilience. We will discuss how the intersection of drivers such as inequity, such as climate change, unequal distribution of money, power, and resources, and climate change vulnerability impact individual and community resilience and well-being, and why we must invest in place-based and community-led actions that center connection and belonging. I'd like to welcome our guests today. Sheila Murray is a writer, a former documentary filmmaker, sound editor, and communications specialist, in addition to writing novels. Her 2009 to 2013 research, communications, and outreach for the Omega Foundation's community-based project, Smart Saver, contributed to reaching thousands of Toronto community workers and families and created successful partnerships and networks. Sheila has led the Toronto-based organization Community Resilience to Extreme Weather since 2014. She has a BAA in journalism and an MA in immigration and settlement studies. And Lidia Ferreria is the former executive directors of FutureWatch, Environment and Development Education Partners, a leading organization in community-based environmental and capacity building initiatives in the city of Toronto. Lidia trained in Argentina for 7 years to become an architect and urban planner, and came to Toronto from Paraguay in 1999. Since 2000, she has used her ability to engage with Toronto's multicultural communities to form bridges with mainstream institutions. She has led projects related to urban naturalization, environmental protection, revitalization, and community capacity building. Folks are welcome to use the Q&A box during their chat, and folks will be able to answer questions as they come up. Sheila and Lidia, welcome. Thank you for being here. Please go ahead.
Hello, and thank you, Kathryn, and it's so great to see so many people on this call today. Thank you, Tamarack. I'll just say at the outset that Crew is a small grassroots volunteer-driven organization doing most of our work in Toronto in the St. Jamestown neighborhood, and you'll hear more from Lidia about that. I'm the project director, and Lidia is the community engagement specialist. Next slide, Lidia, please. So, as you've heard, we were formed in 2014 to raise awareness of local climate impacts. And that came about because the ice storm and floods of 2013 were a real eye-opener, I think, for Toronto residents. And as I was working with or on a table with a number of environmentalists, and we sort of looked at each other and thought, this is the moment to really begin to communicate our concerns around climate change. And this was at a time when people chose not to talk about climate change. It was sort of very distant stuff until 2013 and those two events. So we got started then as a sort of communications model, and we felt our way into it. And very shortly after that, I became aware of work by people like Susie Moshe, who talk about the best way of communicating difficult subjects, difficult issues, and climate change is certainly one of those, is through from hearing those things from people like ourselves. So that's one thing to keep in mind when we talk about Crew's work. And then the other piece was that shortly after I began speaking to people, poking around, seeing what kinds of impact we could have, I was asked to help make a heat wave, excuse me, an emergency protocol with a group of low-income seniors in the sort of north of Toronto, living in a number of different high-rise buildings. Half of them were Chinese, actually, and most of those didn't speak any English. And then the other half were a really diverse crew. What they had in common was low income and a real interest in learning how to respond the next time an extreme weather event hit. And so what this is following up on the ice storm. So I'm going to just tell you very briefly how we got to the work we do today. We got some funding, worked with the social agency up in North Toronto, and spent 8 months, not every day and over 8 months, but over an 8 month period talking to seniors about designing a protocol for a response to an emergency weather event. And what they came up with after hearing from different experts on emergency preparedness and public health and so on, and spending a lot of time looking at different materials and images and fonts and messaging, which they guided us through. We came up with a protocol. Lidia, do you want to go back to that previous slide? Because these are the two of the folk who came up with this protocol. After 8 months and all of this work, the protocol was, if something happens, we will meet in the lobby. We'll know that we need to meet in the lobby, and then we'll go and check on people. And that came about because over those 8 months, along with all the other work they were doing, they were talking to their neighbors about the work. They were meeting their neighbors. They were buddying up to go and meet neighbors who they felt uncomfortable with. And by the time it was all done, they had posters that they could put in their own lobbies, and everybody would understand what would happen. And the central question that they asked of their neighbors was, if something happens, do you want us to come check on you? And in the vast number of cases, the answer is yes. And if somebody says no, then that's a real clue that probably they will need somebody to check up on them. And keep in mind, there's a diversity of people living in a high-rise building, and some of them will have mental illness, some of them will have physical disabilities, be mobility challenged, and all sorts of other issues. So we've stayed in this space. That's where we got to. It's not where we set out to, but it's where we arrived at after working with these wonderful people. And we've continued with that work at our core, because we know that emergency preparedness and this idea that somebody would check on you is pretty fundamental stuff and is of interest to most people in most buildings of any kind, anywhere. I would suggest, if you live on a house, in a single family house on a street, you would like your neighbor to check on you if something goes wrong. So then since then, we have introduced a number of other programs that sort of support this idea. And I'm going to sort of name the idea, which was really social networking, building social networking, identifying social capital, helping people make friends across differences. The building, that the neighborhood we're focused on now, that Lidia is going to speak to you about when I'm finished here, is very is multicultural, and I think over 100 different languages are spoken there. So this social networking is super important because people really, there are lots of barriers to knowing each other. We are figuring out how to break down those barriers. So we now, our central programs are the emergency preparedness piece, which is training leaders and buddy wellness checks. And we have a whole bunch of tools that go along with that stuff. Green discovery walks, really important to us. I'll talk more about those later. We do a lot of work with seniors, and we know how important this is to alleviating isolation and loneliness. We have a heat wave protocol we spent the last couple of years developing, which is more and more important, heat being the most sort of threatening climate event that we know is coming to Toronto. Finding local meeting spaces, I'll talk more about that later, and then supporting and empowering volunteers, trained volunteers. Training is a key here. It's really important to us. Everybody is trained to make presentations, to make public presentations. So I'm going to stop there. That's enough from me, I think. And Lidia, over to you. Can talk about St. Jamestown.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. Hi, everyone. So this is community-led. Basically, this is St. Jamestown. So you're going to see the picture is a block of 19 high-rise building. As Sheila mentioned before, this is a very dense community. Officially, the city say is around 18 people living there, but unofficially it's around 30,000 people. And it's like a very present issues there, like people living in an overcrowded situation. So all, for example, like families with 5 kids living in 1-bedroom apartment. So that's very common in St. Jamestown. As many challenges and risk there around heat wave, power outage, air quality, food insecurity, eco-anxiety, among other emergencies. It's very hard to find places to meet. So basically, networking is something very hard to find in St. Jamestown, and that is why we are very strongly working there. And we are in this neighborhood from 2017. And the program that we are going to show what exactly we're doing. So this is the heat wave protocol. So we are working with T in collaboration with T, that is Toronto Alliance, Environment Alliance, and when we start this protocol, so we invite 12 community leaders. So to discuss about what exactly needs to be in the protocol. So what are the missing pieces for people to be prepared for a heatwave emergency? And also we invite community organizations, service providers, and also the City of Toronto to co-create all together this community-led emergency preparedness. And this is I'm going to pass very quickly. This is the 10 local volunteers. Mainly they were like young people, university students and some mothers, so it's an academic. And we discussed about what exactly needs to be in the protocol and to co-create the draft. And then we present the draft to a stakeholder, 20 stakeholders like from the City of Toronto Emergency Management Office. We have a Red Cross, we have different people who can basically provide us their insight on this protocol. And then when we have the draft again, we went back to the community. So we did around 4 different community consultations where we were asking people how they're feeling about the protocol and how important their feedback are for us. So basically it's creating that kind of ownership and belonging to this kind of work. And that was amazing to see all the responses about the protocol. And this is our protocol. So we have 5 different areas that with very simple tips, like a communication, like how all residents can receive notifications about the heat waves and homes, how you can keep cool your apartment. And if that's very hot, how you can go outside and you have a cool areas and cooling stations. Contact system is basically how vulnerable residents receiving check-in and support from volunteers. And then support services is about local services around the neighborhood, like a library or community center. And then last year, and between last year and this year, so like for example, this heat wave protocol, we did that, and with the funding from the I don't remember now, Sheila, is the the environmental cooperation. So that is like a kind of like a cooperation between Mexico, Canada, and USA. And then we work in this growing heat emergency program for tenant and high-rise buildings. So with the City of Toronto, and with this program, so basically the city was asking questions to community members about what exactly is missing when the extreme weather happening. And so that also makes like a kind of very interesting way how you create belonging to in a community, because they feel that their voice are important. So the city is asking there like about what exactly needs to be done. And that was a very interesting process. And Sheila?
Thanks, Lidia. I just use this slide to underscore the importance of training. So we're all about, I mean, there's some core pieces, as I've said before, building those social networks so that people have lots of support from like-minded folk with similar sort of knowledge around these issues. And in this, in the process of their sort of, supporting their walking out into the public with this stuff, our volunteers do make presentations on various subjects, often about heat, but also emergency preparedness and crew and so on, to the public. Again, the emphasis is on training and support to do this. Shall I talk about this, Lidia? This is these are our volunteers now. The slide on the left is volunteers in front of City Hall. There was a lot of policy action around changing city bylaws to work toward a 26-degree maximum temperature in the summer. We know how important that is. Our volunteers had media training and have become the sort of go-to for media when the heat hits. We're already starting to hear from media about heat. and they get, of course, as much support as we can give them through this. But again, this idea, this comes like out of the neighborhood and into the city. This promotes a sense of belonging not only to each other in their neighborhood, but also to having a place in the city and an important voice.
So this is our work at the community. So we train community leaders in all these different buildings to become emergency volunteers. In a very simple way, it's just like a practical actions around emergency preparedness that includes possession of 72 hours emergency kit and plan. And as Sheila mentioned, for us is networking is the key to create community resilience in the neighborhood. So we have a different training pieces in the neighborhood. So we show in a very easy way how you can get your emergency kit and how important is you have a plan. And and you are going to see that we always have this round table. I was mentioning this to Sheila today that for us it's very important to have this kind of meeting because it's not like a formal kind of presentation about like people who knows and people who is listening. So for us, it's like everyone, we sit together and we discuss all together all these different issues. And that's the way that we are creating basically is like a more belonging in the community. And also we work with young people. So we designed this emergency plan and key training game. And the whole idea is to bring all these diverse young people together and discuss a common issue that is to be emergency ready. And we have a lobby information session in all these different buildings. So in a very simple way. So we just have a small table with all this information and we just inform people who wants to be informed, like who is passing by. And also like as a volunteer, decide to go to the door and we have a very amazing WhatsApp group where we are like all the time changing information between residents. And that is also another one. So, and then Sheila, you're going to explain about this.
Yeah. Very briefly on this one, local meeting spaces. This is so important. Crew doesn't have an office. We don't pay rent anywhere. We use local meeting spaces. We have had to fight to get them. It's been like pulling teeth, but we're getting them now. I think we have 2 or 3 or 4 even now locally, and that's been a great accomplishment. And looking at this particular slide, what's really cool here is that we got a space opened in one of the apartment buildings in their community room in the lobby, which had been locked up and was just full of cleaning supplies for years. Finally got them to open the door. And when they did, they cleared out a little bit of space for us. We had to sort of live with that for the first while. Lidia put the banner up beside the open door, and then we showed up every single Friday, Lidia and volunteers. And after 3 Fridays, 4 Fridays, residents started to take it seriously, and they began to drop in. And now we have people dropping by, looking forward to Fridays and spending time with the team. Shall I talk about this slide? I just want to say that in all of the efforts, and it has taken a long time, we have finally made the connections through using the sorts of tools that I'm going to talk a little bit about the Resilientville game coming up, but through those tools and that engagement, we have now sort of some direct access to City Hall. And in these processes, the volunteers are saying they feel as though they're being heard for the first time. And that's been a wonderful experience. Lidia, we've got about 4 minutes left, Lidia. So
yeah, exactly. So I'm just going to pass very quickly. This is our socially connected resilience at Town Senior. So we get together and we have so basically it's like working together. So we have a conversation about how we need to take care about us and during any kind of emergency. And we have these seniors and non-senior weekly conversation that is, luckily we have a space in the local church. And this is a very interesting to hear that people that is coming is around 20 people, and they say like every Tuesday, and they say the 3 hours they are the happy hours. So we make craft conversations. So we discuss about issues, families. So it's a very nice way to create belonging to the neighborhood and also to people to get together and creating welcoming spaces for intergenerational collaborative projects. So we put together seniors with young people and also like different, we create this kind of like interfaith connection too. And this is building social networks. So we work very strongly with community, with agencies around the neighborhood. And so building social capital. So uh, because we have this free space at the church, so in return, we basically do gardening and we clean the garden site. So it's a very interesting way how we are like having this kind of like a win-win situation between the local church who was totally isolated before. So now we grew in this program. So it's a very important part of the neighborhood. Sheila, you want to say something about this? So
Yeah, this building social capital, just again to underscore how this grows. So now we have a great relationship with people in the Anglican Church, and that's a whole different income level, and there's wonderful opportunities for great support around these new relationships for everybody. Access to green spaces. This is one of our favorites. I'm not going to spend any time talking about this slide, Lidia, but just to say that we take people, we have something we call green discovery walks, and we go on group walks to all sorts of different Toronto locations. This is essential to building belonging, because there are folk who are in this neighborhood who may have lived there for a couple of decades, who have really never gone any further than the neighbor, than just the sort of distance around their neighborhoods. It fosters a real sense of belonging to Toronto. And let's just fly through this, Lidia. This we've, the volunteers, that previous slide, volunteers have organized themselves into sort of individual independent groups. But we're very proud to say that, for instance, this lot, the St. Jamestown Climate Action, they chose to stick the name crew on the end of their name, which we really makes us very pleased. And these are some of the tools that we use. Neighborhood asset mapping, that will make some good sense to you, I think, self-evident. Resilientville, a neighborhood role-playing game. This is around strategizing for emergency and bringing community stakeholders together. We have a wonderful community workbook, which is like a play-by-play for doing the kind of work we do and engaging community around the climate impacts that we're concerned with. And we're going to end right there. Sorry, that was a bit of a rush at the end, but I think the most important part of this is hearing from people who are on the call. So thank you very much.
thank you.
Wow. Thank you both so much. I actually was as you were going through those slides, I was just like, oh, democratic access to nature, we know, is an evidence-based practice for belonging and for people to feel connected to where they live and each other. So I appreciated that aspect of it so much. We'll take this discussion now to the larger group. I see one question in the chat box, and Amanda's just going to explain a little bit how to ask questions in this format in case folks don't know, and then we'll take it to a larger discussion.
Hi, everybody. And yes, thank you so much for this, for going over all of the work that you're doing and this topic. If anybody has a question that you would like to ask, if you don't mind posting it in the Q&A, which you should be able to see next to the raise hand, that would be awesome. I'll keep an eye out for your question in the chat as well. And if you have any trouble finding the Q&A, please say so in the chat, and I or one of my wonderful colleagues will help you locate the Q&A section. So we're going to go ahead and start with the first Q&A question that I have here in the Q&A from Emily Ranta. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. Emily says, thank you for this very interesting presentation. Any tips or suggestions for nonprofits looking to access space for free in their communities?
me unmute myself. Be tenacious. I mean, identify your spaces. Talk to folk who live in those spaces, who live around you. Ask them where they would meet if they know. And in some cases, we found community rooms that we'd never heard of. And they were pointed out to us by residents who'd been there for many years and never knew that once upon a time that was a community room, but the door hasn't been opened in years. So I would say, you know, do the work of trying to figure out where the meeting spaces might be, and then just be tenacious. I mean, it took us a long time to get those high-rise community rooms opened. Took us a long time to get even the community center. We still struggle with the community center, even though that's their job is to provide space for meeting. It's easier for them not to engage, I think, and I suspect that's what happens. And also the city, I don't know where you're calling from, but the city of Toronto certainly is still recovering from the pandemic, and there are lots of folk doing work that they're new to with very little experience. So you just have to keep going in the nicest way. Lydia would say, you know, tell them you're not going to be a problem. You're there to make things better in the neighborhood. You're there to
because
build.
that is great, Sheila, that you say that, because that is the main key is basically is to show that you are there for the community. So you are not going to be there judging there or something that because people, especially all these like corporation people or housing people, they are totally scared that you are going to start training people to be against there. But that is totally that you need to show that is not what you are looking for. You are looking for like a space that you are going to use with the community. And as Sheila say, is to be present. It's basically to show that what is your interest is basically is the community, and that you are working for the community, with the community. It's I would say like after like almost 7 years doing this and be present and there, and then also like working with community members to request all these different spaces is now it's kind of easy for us to get all these spaces. Also, we are invited to be on these spaces, but that takes time. And as Sheila say, is just be there and just do your work and wait.
Yeah, don't give up, be nice. And I
And
see
be nice.
lots of great suggestions in the chat, and they seem sort of self-evident, but you may be surprised to find that sometimes they're not as easy, they're not as accessible as you imagine them to be. So just go in and be patient and keep trying.
I love that. Be tenacious and be nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
be nice and be nice.
So our next question is Rochelle Haddock. Thank you for your inspiring work. Did either of you have any surprising learnings throughout the work?
That for me, I will say that personally, for me, was very interesting to see. We have this very dense high-rise community, and then just across the street, this beautiful community space that is a church. And that was like oil and water. So that was very impossible to put together these two elements. And then little by little we start like having this conversation and getting in and helping them. And then I remember like preparing this community get together, doing a community garden. And all this congregation that mainly they are white people. So basically it's seniors and a quarter. And me with this colorful community with different religion and everything, they say, oh my goodness, this is going to be very hard. But then gardening, getting into the nature and doing nice conversation, doing something. So it's basically we blended all together. So now we are like a very nice interfaith community. So that for me, I would say like my aha moment with my work in the community. So Sheila.
I mean, I think, you know, at the outset, probably the surprise was, as I said at the beginning of this, that I expected us to be working on climate communication sort of rather more broadly. So, you know, how do you you tell people about this stuff? And where we ended up in pretty short time is, as I've said, focused very much on this sort of building expertise and knowledge among residents who then speak to each other. So that was unexpected. That was just a sort of naturally morphing there. And we've obviously stuck in that place. And I think it's so important, and I think it's a model that certainly could happen across all income groups, but is most relevant certainly to lower income folk who are really stuck in place. They have no, they don't have places to go when stress mounts. So we stay in our lane, and we're very pleased to be there. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question, I'm not sure we're going to get to all of these, but maybe we will, is from Timothy Wild. In addition to resilience, is there any advocacy work on the group for more preventative social policy?
Good question, Timothy. We don't do advocacy particularly. I mean, we do our work. We have good relationships with the City of Toronto, growing again. These are new relationships now because the pandemic shook the city upside down, scattered people to all four winds. But we have good relationships, so they know what we represent, the sort of social justice issues that we represent. But we don't do campaigning. We don't do advocacy. Our volunteers do now. The groups that have evolved from the work that we do, they've discovered a voice, and they're empowered, and they know how to work with City Hall now. They know how to talk to media, so they advocate on their own behalf. We don't do that. I think Lidia said something which was critical for us, is maintaining those friendly relationships. So if we were, for instance, advocating for big change in Toronto community housing buildings and sort of ringing alarm bells about what goes on there, and there's an awful lot that needs to change, we wouldn't have a relationship that allows for community rooms to open, and they are now opening for us. So we stay there. We have a fantastic relationship with the Toronto Environmental Alliance, T. We've done a lot of projects with them over the last couple of years, and they are campaigners. They're campaigners, and they push policy, and so we complement each other very well, because we're in the community doing the action, and they work with us there, but then they can take what they learn and advocate and campaign around it.
Awesome, thank you so much for that. We have a question here from Minaz Asani. Hi, Sheila and Lidia. Although we've worked together, it's great to hear all about Crew's amazing work. My question is about volunteers. How do you get residents from this underserved community to volunteer? Do they receive anything from their participation? And if they don't, what motivates them to volunteer?
Okay, Manaz, that's a good question. Thanks for asking. I'll say that, first of all, we prioritize honorarium for our volunteers. So anything they do, and that might be showing up to have a share in a lunch date, they might get an honorarium for. And we do that because we understand what low income is, and we value their time. And we feel they need to be compensated. If we're being paid, if Lydia's being paid, then they should be paid. So there's that, and the people are very appreciative of financial compensation, regardless of how small it is. And it really does depend on the level of funding we have for different programs, and sometimes we just take it straight out of our own operational funds, which are small, let me say. So there's that, but so that's one thing. That's a sort of beginning starting point. But we've been, and I'm going to, Lidia, again, has been in the neighborhood now for quite a number of years. We've had some wonderful experiences. People have, as I said earlier, found a voice, found a sense of belonging. That's what we're talking about today, but truly found a sense of belonging to crew. And I'm going to say that there's a level of loyalty now to crew that is very moving and feels very precious and important. And so then really I'm going to just share something. Lidia was ill for a while, very ill for a while. It was a scary time. That's long ago and far away now. But during that period, volunteers stepped in, and they had the knowledge and the expertise and the concern and the commitment to just carry on with the crew programming. So I think really now, Minaz, the piece there, the biggest piece is we've been there for a long time in the neighborhood, and more people know about us, and volunteers find their way to us. And Lidia will tell you there are people now coming from not necessarily to volunteer, but showing up for the good times from different places in the city outside of the neighborhood. So
Even from
Mississauga. So talk about growing social networks, and they're not low income folk. Some of those. So that we really are growing those fantastic social networks.
And also, it's like for our volunteers, they are so proud to have this like a crew volunteer, like the name, the title. So that is very important for them, because that means that sometimes, so like for example, we are training different people, and we send, for example, like a young university student that they are our volunteers to do a presentation to University of Toronto. About our work. So Sheila and I, we don't need to be there. Or like, for example, community agencies asking us to present. So we send our volunteer to do the presentation. So they feel that they belong to this organization. And so we respect them. And it's a very equal situation there. Like, for example, when we are preparing a meeting, let's say with the City of Toronto staff, we really take care about all this detail, the same detail that we care when we are working with the community. So that is the way how we are totally like invested with our volunteers.
Yeah, as I said at the outset, we began as a grassroots volunteer-driven organization, and we remain that way. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you so much for that. I am going to go ahead and move on to a question we've got from Deb Borsos. Thanks for this. It's so inspiring. Within your green discovery walks, have there been things such as identifying areas in the neighborhood that could use more trees for shade, then working with local government, finding funding for trees with city, in collaboration with the city, and maybe building stronger community connections through work like this? Deb is thinking of Tree Canada and how they provide trees for public areas.
Lidia, over to you with the correct answer to that.
Yes, it's very interesting because we have this small grant with TD Friend of the Environment. And currently we are discussing with volunteers, also with the community, about how we are going to design green spaces around their buildings and what exactly they want to see there. The only issue is, and also we have a conversation with the City of Toronto Forestry and Recreation. And the issue in St. Town is like, in the 60s, so they create this kind of like luxury way to live in the towers. And the whole idea was towers in the park, but it's no park, because what happened is they have this very gigantic underground parking. So basically it's the ground is like a cement like this. So it's very impossible to plant trees. But now we are discussing with the city, because our volunteers, they are totally into getting more greenery and also like cooling spaces. And so now we are discussing with city people about like how we can get the plan for like a green areas where we can plant more trees, because for the moment that is something that totally impossible to do it.
Yeah, we have all sorts of ideas about how to build out sort of natural spaces, you know, enhance the green spaces, make walking networks through St. Jamestown, inviting people from outside of the neighborhood to walk through the neighborhood, to share, you know, share some of the sort of work that's going on there. We have all sorts of wish lists.
Yeah, we have in our website, we have this like green, linking green spaces in St. Jamestown. So we passed very quickly, but that was a map with all these numbers. So we have like 10 different places that we totally dream to have like a very proper cooling spaces with trees and shades and benches and misting stations, something like that.
Yeah, I'll just say also we consider green space and you know, equitable access to green space a climate issue for sure, as you said, Kathryn, earlier.
Sounds like there isn't a lot you all haven't put your hands on and tried to do the best you can to do something about, and I can't imagine how frustrating that would be. Come up against.
It takes a long time, but things do change, and it's so great when you actually see something going well. You know, things go well in the neighborhood all the time, but to have outside stakeholders sort of, you know, have their aha moments, which does happen, and when that, and then they actually have the authority to do something. Those are great moments.
And also is like we are inspiring our volunteers. Like for example, I was working with this young person from high school who was doing community hours with me. And then now he is a university student doing environmental sustainability studies. And he's a very huge advocacy about like planting more trees and getting the neighborhood more like a green and like a friendly. So it's amazing how you can start like inspiring people also living there.
Absolutely. It's incredibly powerful. And just kind of to second some things that are in the chat, what a ripple effect from ORPA and how those the systems change at small pieces at a time.
Okay.
Kind of circling back to a question we asked before and something ORPA said, it's incredible to hear the level of trust you've cultivated in your communities. And I want to second that. This a little bit jumps off of that. This is from Kathryn Forsyth. Kathryn says, fabulous work. Wondering if you are connected to your local community and safety well-being plan, or do those exist only in rural Ontario?
Lidia, there are safety projects that come.
It's like the city provides like a low income neighborhood about this safety community safety program, but it's totally different. It's about like because Toronto is like a very dense let's say city, so the safety program is more about to be safe and so no like studying or something like that, no related community resilience. So but we are like having that kind of conversation with them about like how important it is to build community resilient in order for the community to be very safe and connected.
It sounds like there might be some geographical differences then with how.
Yeah, I think what Kathryn's talking about, I have heard of that sort of thing in rural communities. There's sort of some, and they go along with search and rescue efforts as well, I think. And yeah, so we haven't seen anything like that in the city, just these safety initiatives around, as Lidia says, violent crime, drug use, that kind of thing. Yeah, very different.
Got it. It's super interesting. That actually reminds me of something that came up in a previous conversation we were having today about community safety, also meaning preventing hate crimes, which was definitely another angle to this. So we have another question here from John Bass or Bass. have you formed a nonprofit or charitable organization? And has this in any way led to funding opportunities?
Yeah, John, that's a great question. We are an NGO essentially. We are an organization. We've been around for 10 years as CREW, as a community resilience to extreme weather. We're not a charity, but we are happily at the moment housed on the Makeway Foundation's shared platform. And if you don't know Makeway, maybe someone can put a link in the chat. Makeway Foundation has a philanthropic arm. Things are changing there now. Their ED has recently left. The new ED coming in. We're all a little bit nervous about what might happen. But the way their shared platform works is it hosts organizations of various sizes. We would be small on the shared platform. We would be one of the smaller ones for sure. I think they have up to 60 projects, they call them, on their shared platform. And Makeway is a charity, so we have their charitable number, and their board is ultimately responsible for us. For if something goes really wrong, it will hit their board rather than our steering committee. And for those who are interested, Makeway takes 12% of our revenue. Everything that comes in, pretty much, they take 12%, but we get an enormous amount back from them: legal, financial, HR, and backup when we need it. So we think it's very worthwhile. So we're a charity without having to do any of the. Lidia and I, neither of us wants to do any of the difficult operational work of keeping books and worrying about audits and all the rest of that awful stuff. We don't do that. Makeway does that.
Thank you all so much. I have a couple of questions that Tamarack staff were curious about. The neighborhood asset mapping, could you just share the resource that you use to do that with folks? And I was curious how that came about with language barriers and other issues in the community. If you could just speak a little bit to doing that in a really not necessarily low barrier, but inclusive way.
The asset mapping, both the asset mapping and the Resilientville role-playing game, both of those things were designed initially in San Francisco around earthquake response by people working for a terrific guy who worked for the city of San Francisco. He was our mentor in the early days. We have taken those tools from San Francisco and adapted them for Canada. The asset mapping is really a simple piece. We use a frame around, so if you're in a particular community and you're going to have folk from that community meet with you, you'll do some kind of Google Map image, we print them big. These, as you saw, we can print them really big. And the frame around them, the sort of prompts around them are to sort of make a response to some climate event that has happened, and then what would you do in your community to respond? So the asset mapping is about the strengths in the community to do that. Where are your public meeting spaces? Where are you going to get food from? How are you going to do this? Where are you going to raise your volunteers to go do help with wellness checks? All of that sort of stuff can be picked up on the map, and many, many more people get very creative. So we're happy to share that frame with you. And I know that Google, there is some Map My City or something. There are all sorts of great Google tools now for doing this. So people get on their phones and they bring their, local knowledge, and they also bring their devices, and they have a lot of fun doing that.
And also, you don't need to translate in different languages.
No.
So for us, it's like, that is not working. So what is working is training community leaders that that can speak in different languages. So that is the person who is going to work with people in their own languages. And that is very powerful.
Yeah, we rely on people speaking, again, people like themselves speaking to them rather than translated materials.
Because no one is reading that.
Because people don't read them. In our experience, people don't read them.
In our experience, people don't read either. So curious. So actually that's an interesting segue, because it's clear that you're growing impact by connecting with leaders in your in communities. And there is a community workbook that you have developed or utilized. Could you just share a little bit more about that and step by step for folks that are looking to do that in their communities?
Yeah, happily. This was a dream of Lydia's, a community workbook. She'd wanted to do it forever. We never had the money. We never had any money to do that sort of thing. And then along came this really weird grant. We thought, well, we don't know anything about these people. Let's ask for money to support the workbook. And lo and behold, along it came. So we now have a community workbook, which you can find on our website. I think all of these things you can find on the website. So it's a sort of step-by-step around Crew's approach, and it addresses the climate impacts. So if you want to speak to people about climate in your neighborhood, and you're a community leader or a community agency or somebody with a real interest in learning more about climate change, it's really designed for you, because it makes climate change very accessible and direct. And it's really it's designed for community. It's a step-by-step, and it's a living document. We're adding to it now. We've had a wonderful grant supporting work around mental health and mental illness in relationship to climate change. And that's a learning curve for us, for sure. We've always known that was a climate impact, something is not our area, but we're learning a lot and working with some wonderful doctors, and that will be included in the workbook over time. So we would love people to take up this workbook and try it for themselves and let us know how it feels. So if you have any interest at all, we'll happily talk to you about the workbook.
I always say it's like very simple recipes there.
Recipes, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. We're just getting to 3 minutes to the hour here. So I just want to thank you both for inspiring me and everyone on this call with this community-based space that is so important. This idea of like going neighborhood by neighborhood, community by community, being together, belonging, and in all kinds of crisis, climate or otherwise. Thank you so much. And yes, we are going to send out all the resources and everything else that was mentioned here today. Not to worry, we will do that heavy lifting for folks. So please join us for part 2. I've put the link in the chat. And then if you haven't yet signed the Pledge for Belonging, we encourage you to do that. Belonging is at the center of every interconnected issue that we face. Thank you. Oh, yes, thanks, Amanda. I forgot that we had slides for this. And then also, we would love for folks to fill out a webinar survey. Your feedback helps us improve and support learnings in all kinds of a good way. So part 2, and then, yeah, that's great, Amanda, go ahead. So June 25th. And then we just want to thank you all for being here. And Lidia and Sheila, any final words before we head out?
We said this before, we were all meeting before this webinar opened, and how, just how fundamental is the idea that, if something goes wrong, would you like to know your neighbor? And the more neighbors you know, the more you feel you belong to the community. That didn't come from me. That was Amanda.
Amanda.
Yeah, Amanda. So thank you for that. But that really does sum it all up.
Yeah, I
Thank
just want
you.
to say thank you. And also for me, I want to say that my work with Crew also is along with the community, is part of my resilient hub, like a resilient community. So basically is, I will say is Sanjay's Town is my home too. So that is the way how we are working. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for listening to us today. Thank you.
Thank you. And one final question is, are the good people at Crew willing to mentor or can connect with other communities that are trying to do something similar so they can learn from you?
100%.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Lidia.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.